So, what do you know about the treasure that is assumed to be,
Like I said, there are several stories about what that treasure is.
Yeah.
One is that it was gold coins. The other is that it was silver. It was silver. First of all, there was never any gold discovered in any part of this area. That there has been silver discovered. There are places in Vermont where gold has been discovered, but not in this area.
Oh.
Like I started to tell you, one of the stories was the story of it was called Nebuchadnezzar's sea chest. You all heard Nebuchadnezzar, maybe? Ancient history,
yeah,
maybe?
yeah.
But anyway, this boat, this ship was called, the trading vessel was called Nebuchadnezzar. And apparently it did business all along Nova Scotia to South Carolina, and up to Maine and down through. Supposedly, the captain of that ship was a first-class son of a gun, and used to beat the sailors mercilessly on almost the smallest infraction, whatever it was considered to be an infraction. But he also insisted wherever he traded that he get gold in return for his whatever they were trading. And he would store the gold in chests and kept them in his cabin. He was also something of a boozer. And so when they were docked in Boston area, he went ashore, and while he was ashore, some of the sailors who had been beaten and really thought he was a son of a gun, they decided to kill the guards that were his friends that were guarding his chests of gold, whatever. They stole the gold and transported it into town, and then stole horses, 2 teams of horses, and loaded. They could only carry 4, two chests of gold in each one. And they decided to head for Canada because they knew that if they got caught in the United States, they'd be hanged. So they headed toward Canada, and one of the wagons broke down, and so they tried to put it all on one wagon, and they couldn't do it. So they got up this far, and they unloaded some of it and buried it in the caves up here on the South Mountain. That's one of the stories.
Okay, so when was the actual cave with all this treasure supposedly was discovered, or how did people know about it?
There are very different stories about that.
It was just folklore?
This man named, one of the guys I'm talking about, his name is named DeGraw, and he had a Spanish background. The name doesn't sound Spanish to me, it sounds French, but that's what his name was. He supposedly came back. He was the only survivor after years. But this happened after the French and Indian War, which was when that was?
Yeah.
All right, after the French and Indian War, he came back as an older man and tried to find where they had buried the treasure. They had buried it and covered it with rocks and leaves and moss and all that. He was digging around, and some of the people in town discovered him and queried him as to what he was doing and so on. He was very reluctant to tell them. One of the stories is that he did tell them the story, but one of the stories that Ted tells is that he didn't tell them the story. He just said that he was looking for treasure, they had mined silver, and they didn't have enough. The weather was such that they couldn't transport it, or they had too much of it, so they buried it in this cave. And that was the other thing. So one case it was silver, and the other case it was gold coins. So who knows? Maybe probably wasn't either one, but but the fact of the matter is there are several towns in Vermont that have similar stories.
Oh, yeah.
One of them is in Brandon, which isn't very far away. Had a very similar story to the one of the money diggings here.
Is it by the same person? By the same person who dug up all this treasure?
Not the one in Bristol. I don't know whether
not the same person who.
I don't think it's the same person necessarily. I don't know that, but I don't think so.
Huh.
Anyway, there was a period where some other. Well, you'll see in that handout I'm going to give you. Another story was that DeGraw had friends in Canada or in Newport, Lake Memphremagog area, where this man named Sim. What was his last name? Corsair, I think. It's in the book. It's in here someplace. He was kind of a charlatan too, but he enlisted people. He told people in town that if they would contribute $1 toward the excavation work, that when they finally discovered the treasure, that they would get $100 for every $1 they put in, and so on. And so they sold shares. There were lots of people in town that got wind of it, and a lot of people around town would go up there and start digging, hoping they were going to find the treasure.
And did they actually find anything?
No.
No.
Never did.
Never.
No.
So it's pretty much turning into a myth.
Yeah, well, there are lots of myths around it too, but anyway, yes.
Okay, so that's pretty much what we were trying to get at, so thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.